Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, February 11th, 2020, 6:30 p.m. here at the McAuliffe Hearing Room. I'll call the meeting to order. Is there anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, I will go to our first scheduled appointment. Joint meeting with the library trustees, appointment of a library trustee to fill the vacancy, term May 12th, 2020. Mr. Donovan.
Hi, everyone.
Please.
Want me to start?
Do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Amy Yazdani. I was recently appointed the Vice Chair of the Southborough Library Board of Trustees. Please note that the Library Board of Trustees does not have quorum present, so we're not officially in session tonight. The trustees present are Kim Reagan and Amy Vekwas. At the last Board of Trustees meeting on January 21st, 2020, we unanimously voted in favor of resident Jane Maney for the open trustees position. Her past involvement and current commitment to the town of Southborough as a former member of a variety of boards and committees makes her a highly desirable choice for library trustee.
Excellent, thank you. And I just have one question. I've known Janet for many, many years. I think she's going to be an excellent choice. I think she'll do a great job. My only question, and Janet, if you can go to a microphone for if anybody else has any questions or comments. Have you pulled papers yet to run for the position?
No, but I intend to. One of the questions I had is, they have a number of openings. I just want to make sure I do the right one. So I'm not running against a different member by mistake and leaving this open.
Okay.
But yes, I intend to.
Excellent. That's the only question I had.
Yeah, just a comment. The library, I think, is going to be incredibly well served, and I think you're joining a pretty good group. So good all around.
Thank you, Marty.
I also welcome back, Janet. It's nice to see you get back involved in volunteering for the town. So very, very pleased. So thank you.
Thank you.
I had the pleasure of working with Janet for a number of years on the advisory committee, and I think she'll do a great job. Thank you for volunteering. I think this is a great benefit for the town and for the library. Thank you.
And I answered Sam's Greek question earlier, so he...
Several detailed questions, nuclear physics, Greek history, all those kind of things, to make sure she was appropriately qualified. But, she answered them all, so.
Okay. Excellent. With that, do we have a motion?
I will move to appoint Janet Maney to a library trustee position for a term that expires on May 12, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved,
Second.
seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Appreciate you coming. And thanks again, Janet. Hang on one second, please.
Could not have a joint meeting. You have made the appointment. They've recommended, but they have not appointed. She's not appointed yet.
So, but we don't have to do it at the same time. Can it be seriatim?
It's usually a joint meeting. They'll have to meet to do it.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Okay, so.
all right. So just to clarify, our board has voted to appoint Ms. Maney, but the library trustees must also meet because they're...
Correct. It is a joint appointment to fill the vacancy between the two elected boards. The library trustees, per the letter from Mr. Donovan, Brian, I'm sorry. I was trying to pull this together quickly and consult with Mrs. Hale. So it's a joint appointment of the library trustees and the Board of Selectmen. Library did not have a quorum tonight, therefore could not call themselves into order and take a vote. They have given you, per Mr. Donovan's letter, a letter that they met and they voted 5-0 to recommend. So they have not voted to appoint. So you have just voted to appoint. Library trustees will need to meet when they do have a quorum to vote to appoint. She's not appointed yet. Halfway.
Do you have a quorum without Ms. Maney on the board?
Tonight, we do not.
But generally you do.
Yeah, the board is scheduled to meet next week, so we could, I think the memo that I wrote is a typo. The board did vote on the 21st. I think I had written it prior to the meeting.
I
and
just
plugged in the
check
name.
your
Check
meeting
the
minutes, and if you voted, then you're fine. If not, I'd take
Okay.
another vote.
Yep.
Is that
Does that
okay,
make sense,
Mark? All right.
I just want to make sure that there's not an issue. So, because right now, what you've given the board, and it may be that you've just misstated what's actually in the minutes, is that you've got a recommendation from the trustees, you've got a vote to appoint from the Board of Selectmen. You just need to make sure there's a matching vote to appoint from the trustees.
We were supposed to originally have a quorum tonight, but I have 2 members who were unavailable, so this is exactly why we need another trustee. So I will make sure to double check the minutes, and then I will get back to Mr. Purple. Okay?
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next item, Fire Chief and Police Chief, in reference to Middlesex Savings Bank donations. Chief Achilles, Chief Paulus, welcome.
And you're not alone.
We brought some friends with us, so.
So I must say, much happier to be here this week. Last week, we were asking for money, and then this week, we have good news.
Yeah, you've got it in the wrong order.
So pleased to introduce Community Banking Officer Ed Muris and his assistant Bob Muckian. They're from Middlesex Savings Bank. We have a branch over on Corderville Road, as you know. And in this age of phishing emails, I just got an email from Ed saying, hey, good news, we have $10,000 for you. So I was initially thinking it might be the clearinghouse sweepstakes. But a quick phone call and exchange of email. Very proud they have a program going where they're honoring first responders. So 52 in all, split between 26 from fire and police, probably in the communities that they have branches in. So I actually got together with the fire chief. We asked them to come in. This is a significant donation, and I know if the board approves it, we plan to use it for training. So, you know, our first responders can keep themselves safe and also serve the community with the best training that they know how. And I also know the fire chief has some plans if he wants to speak on it quick.
And one, it's really nice, I saw them before the meeting, to get a donation that substantial, even for a community like us. It's a pretty big deal, and we're doing the same thing. We want to supplement one of the grants we got so that we can purchase a dryer as part of our decontamination of our gear, and then use the rest to supplement some of the safety equipment that we've spent money on with some of our new employees to offset some of the stress on the current budget. So very well received by our membership, and very much appreciated.
Very good, thank you very much. So, you know, with the donation as substantial as to both departments, you know, certainly if, you know, Middlesex Savings Bank wants to just give a little bit of a background, and, you know, I'd certainly welcome a plug for the bank as well. You know, just a little bit of, you know, I guess explanation as to, you know, the reasoning behind these contributions to the communities, and certainly welcome you here tonight.
I wasn't
Welcome
prepared
the
for a speech.
contributions.
But you have a PowerPoint presentation just in case.
Well, the bank decided to honor the first responders for in our community where we have the branches. So they decided to give the $10,000 for anything they like to use it for training and equipment, anything like that for them. You know, the bank has been in Southborough for a long time. I think it's over 20 years. So we see them all the time, come in, come out, in the parking lot as well. They're always a pleasure. So it's our pleasure to give that to the fire department, the police department.
I'm new at Middlesex, so I really don't know anything about it.
Very good. Well, thank you both for coming, and again, please thank everybody at Middlesex Savings Bank who's responsible for this. It's great news to receive donations like that, and we're very, very appreciative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments
Very
that
generous.
board members have?
Just, again, I had spoken to you before the meeting, just please, as Chairman Shea said, just send our thanks back. It's greatly appreciated at this time, and it'll certainly have good use here, and we appreciate the partnership that Middlesex has had with the community over the years as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and great recognition too. I mean, it's targeting the first responders is a very good instinct by the bank. We are well served by them, and obviously you think you are as well. So, again, thank you very much on behalf of the town.
Thank you.
We appreciate the community's support. Thank you.
So no, both departments will put something out on our social media, and we'll also send it to Vanessa as well.
Excellent.
Great, thanks, gentlemen.
So with that, I'll
Thank you.
move that this board accept the Middlesex Savings Bank donations to the fire and police departments as stated in the packet.
Second.
Move seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, have a good evening.
You too, thank you.
As I understand from the town administrator, Ms. Galligan and our consultant will be in a little bit later on in the meeting
About 7:30.
for the presentation on the water rate adjustments. So with that, I'm going to continue with the agenda, town administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any issues this evening other than budget and town meeting warrant, which are things, we have the warrant further down here. And after the votes the board took last week, we don't have any updates on the budget. I know that advisory is meeting this evening. Mr. Ballantyne is over there covering that meeting, and hopefully after tonight we'll understand if there's any discrepancies between what advisory is recommending and what selectmen are recommending, and then there may be some opportunities to reconcile those in the next couple of weeks before you sign the final warrant.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman's report, I've got a few things that I just wanted to run through. First, I'm not sure where we are with board members and others in the Selectmen staff office, but just a reminder to the board and Mr. Purple, if you could just make sure that all employees have filled out the acknowledgement of receipt of the conflict of interest forms and return those to the town clerk. Those are due by the end of this month. I know the town clerk is required to report all those who have and also who have not submitted those forms. I would like to be sure that everybody on the board and in the selectman's office have returned those so that we're fully compliant. Also want to thank the New England Center for Children. A number of us from the town visited with them this morning, saw a nice video presentation of their facility and the work that they do there, which was then followed by a tour. In total, we spent about an hour and a half at their facility this morning. They're tremendous hosts to us. It was a very, very informative tour. It's just, eye-opening to see everything that goes on inside that facility and the great good that they do for members of not only our community here in Southborough, but for those across the state and across the country as well, and helping the children who are desperately in need of that help. And I couldn't help as I was leaving but think, where would those poor people be if it wasn't for that facility? And I just want to again recognize them, thank them for their visit. It's great to see firsthand the good work that they do there. So thank you for that invitation. A reminder, the Southborough Police Department is joining forces with the Northborough and Westborough Police Departments for the Citizens Police Academy. Southborough residents interested in applying, please send an email to Officer Stephen Nevert at snevert@southboroughma.com. I'm sure we'll have this information on the town's website, Vanessa, as well. You can also stop into the police station and ask the dispatcher for an application. Applications need to be submitted no later than March 7th, 2020. The academy will include tours of our police stations, demonstrations of equipment used by our departments, introduction to specialized officers such as SWAT officers, patrol procedures, a ride-along, and more. So again, for all those who are interested, applications are now being accepted. Also a reminder that voter registration deadline is tomorrow night. The clerk's office will be open until 8:00 p.m. for those that need to register to vote in the upcoming primary. At the recent MMA meeting, the Mass Municipal Association meeting, we had submitted our town report for consideration for an award by that group, and happy to announce that we received a third-place vote of the for Category 2 with populations between 5,000 and 12,499. Of all those submitted, Southborough's town report received a third-place vote. We have been submitting on that for a number of years, and it's great to see that recognized by MMA. And lastly, just letting people know that we have a posted job opportunity as administrative assistant for the Council on Aging. So we're accepting applications for that position as well, and information for that is available on the town website. And that's what I have. Any other members' reports?
Nothing for me.
Nothing for me.
I do have a couple of things, if I may.
Yep.
First, I would echo Mr. Shea's comment. I had the opportunity to join him and others at the New England Center for Children today. Very impressive operation, groundbreaking, world-leading approaches to dealing and supporting children diagnosed with autism. We're very fortunate to have them in Southborough, and appreciate the contribution they make not only to Southborough but Massachusetts, and national and international support for children diagnosed with this condition. Also, following up on Mr. Shea's comment about Mass Municipal Association, I was able to attend the annual meeting a couple of weeks ago now, and heard a number of interesting presentations that I think have some bearing for Southborough. One is that the cable license deals that we're now in the process of negotiating have been subject to some new rule setting by the Federal Communications Commission that will allow the cable companies, for us, Verizon and Charter, to actually reduce the amount of money they pay for these licenses that goes to the town through some different accounting activities that allow them to reduce those contributions. We are in the process of renegotiating those deals now with our Cable TV Committee, and I've passed some information along to them. I think we're aware of this and working hard to keep those funds flowing as they have been, because that's obviously a key source of revenue for our friends at Southborough Access Media, and great value in terms of the work they do, and so it's important for us to keep that funded. And I think our Cable TV Committee and Southborough Access Media Board are focused on making sure that happens. Another workshop I attended was about recycling, and we've talked about that a little bit here. The world recycling market has crashed. China closed the doors on recyclables a couple of years ago now. Now some of the secondary markets, Malaysia, India, have also closed the door. The disappointing news is that the waste management people that I heard say they don't have a solution to this. They basically are now paying to get rid of stuff that previously they gotten paid for in terms of recyclables. I continue to believe that we need to figure out what we as a town can do about that. Maybe the Public Works Planning Board could take that on, or working with the Recycling Committee, but I think that the economics of that have changed dramatically and aren't going to get better anytime soon, and it's important for us, I think, to get out ahead of that one. I also attended a workshop on economic development by Dr. Barry Bluestone from Northeastern, who our Economic Development Committee has invited out to Southborough to participate in some workshops they've had. He's a regional economist, I guess, looking at things like job trends, employment in the greater Boston area, Massachusetts. And he reported on a study that Northeastern has done for 50 cities and towns in Massachusetts over the last 15 years or so here, that looks at 26 factors that determine job growth and business growth in those towns over the time, to try to figure out what makes a difference there in terms of towns that have been successful, towns that have not been successful over that time period. And very interesting that, in fact, it turns out that there's a group of, I don't know, 8 or 10 things that are most impactful there that the towns could do. The good news is most of those things are things that we actually do have some control over. The things that we don't have control over, like how close to Logan Airport are you, for example, are less critical, it turns out. But things like economic development marketing through the EDC's website and the town's website, sort of getting visibility out there. Timeliness and ease of permitting approvals that we've talked about over the years. Again, we control that. Parking availability, which we certainly have. Public transit access is another one, which we certainly have. And so, again, I think the good news is that we and the EDC, I believe, can do a number of things that make Southborough a more attractive place for businesses. Another workshop related to housing diversity, where, again, the message is multi-use development seems to be an effective model in again, driving economic activity in town centers, et cetera, and the EDC is working on that as well. And so I think that we, as a board, ought to think about taking a position one way or another in this Governor's Housing Choice Initiative that will modify zoning bylaw approval at town meeting. I think there are a lot of arguments on all sides on that one, but we've got an opportunity to tell our story there to our representatives who are going to have to vote on that at some point. And the final one was transportation funding, which was very interesting. The Mass DOT chief engineer made a pitch on how they look at funding requests from towns and cities. And very interesting, she was saying that there is occasionally money available unspent late in the budget cycle, and towns that actually have shovel-ready projects, we've talked about this as well, that might be able to take advantage of that, often find a way to get things funded in an accelerated way versus the normal lead time required. And you need to have a case built on something that MassDOT cares about, and again, those are pretty clear as far as things like improving transportation infrastructure, reducing traffic congestion, et cetera, supporting alternatives such as mass transit, and you need to aggressively pursue it, because the number of DPW directors were in that workshop talking about what they do to keep on top of it and go to all the meetings and argue vociferously for their projects, et cetera. And finally, your legislators can be very helpful, because one comment was that one town, whose name I can't remember, was phenomenally successful, and people were saying, how'd you do that? And the DPW director said, well, our local representative was a ranking member on the House Ways and Means Committee for a number of years. So we were well positioned when money flowed through that pipeline. So I think, again, in fact, our representative, Representative Dykma, is a fairly high ranking member on the House Ways and Means Committee. So I think there's opportunity there. So again, I think there's a number of interesting messages there, and I plan to certainly pursue some of these things, and I think we've got a chance to get some things done based on some of these ideas that are floating around out there. Final point is, I'd remind people the Master Plan Committee meeting is tomorrow evening at Corderville Hall, 7:30. If folks want to listen or input to where the town is going over the next 10 or 20 years, here's an opportunity to be heard and be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Moving to consent agenda. We have taken action on item B already with the vote earlier this evening. Are there any other items that folks would like to hold for a separate vote?
No.
No. So with that, I will move we approve consent agenda items A through K as written in our agenda.
A and C through K.
Accept.
A, I'm sorry, A and C through K.
K.
Yes.
Second.
Sorry. Moved, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. On to other matters properly before the board. The first item I just want to bring up, and I had Mr. Purple send information on this around to the board earlier. The town clerk sent a letter following the posting of tonight's agenda, requesting that we include 2 positions on the normal annual town election ballot. And I think this has been discussed previously, in that you know, as we have taken up the vacancies that have come up over the last few months, we've noted that these are positions that will then subsequently need to be on the ballot. So again, we did receive it less than 48 hours from the posting of the agenda. It is time sensitive because it gives folks the opportunity to pull papers. So I'm going to make the determination as chair that it is, again, it's not really a new item. It's been discussed where these items or these positions would be on the ballot. So I'm going to make a motion tonight, unless there's opposition in taking this up
No
at this
objection here.
meeting tonight. I will make a motion that we include on the annual town election ballot the positions for the library trustee, 2 extra positions, one for a 1-year term and one for a 2-year term, as recommended by the town clerk in his correspondence to us.
Second?
Moved, seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next, continued discussion on the March 28th, 2020 town meeting warrant. Mr. Purple.
Mr. Chair, so I assume you want me to kind of go slow on this so we can get to 7:30? You're being terribly efficient this
Or
evening.
we could
Terribly
go-
efficient this evening.
We go fast and do the 7:30, but
So-
before 7:30.
So Mr. Stivers is looking for a break down there. So, okay, so I wanted to give the board an opportunity to try and, now that you've taken your positions on the budget, the operating and the capital, I want to give the board an opportunity to kind of go through the warrant a little bit. And I listed some of the items here. I'll go through them briefly, and then you can decide how you want to attack this. The first item is the EDC Downtown District Overlay Zoning Bylaw, which we currently have on the warrant as Article 31. We did receive a letter, excuse me, from the EDC asking that article be removed. They no longer wishing to pursue that. I did have a follow-up correspondence from the EDC coordinator, and she had asked that at some point, and I suggested the next meeting in February, they do intend to bring this back in the fall for the board's consideration. They do understand that they do need a sponsor, and they would like the board to consider being that sponsor. So I think that obviously is going to entail a conversation, you know, about what, I think, what they're looking to do and whether the board is willing to sponsor that article. But at this point, I think that the board would look to formally consider removing that article off of the warrant, and that's why I had that item on here. The second item, which is somewhat related, is the purchase of that National Grid parcel 5440 located downtown. I did, you know, I wanted to see where the board is on that, because that is somewhat linked with the EDC discussion of the downtown. I did receive an email last week. I have been trying to get a hold of the woman that I've been speaking to at National Grid, who's been handling the land issues. It appears that somehow I quote-unquote was lost in the inbox. But the email that I've received back now has said that, well, at this point, the town should submit a letter of interest and say that we're interested in purchasing it, which would then begin the process moving forward for discussion. And I didn't know if this is something, you did not take a vote last week to move this capital item to the fall, as you did with several others. I don't know, given that it is linked to the EDC article, whether you feel the same way about doing that with this article, but pursuing the letter of interest at this point. So I thought it was good for the board to have a discussion as to how you wanted to move on that. The third bullet, you have a revised draft of the former ADA bylaw, which is now the SPAC bylaw, which is in your packet. And I wanted, you know, the board would need to formally accept that. I know that there have been some additional comments that I've been made aware of from at least one member. I do know that Mr. Litt, who is here this evening, had some additional comments. I will point out his first comment was an attaboy, so I thought that was good. But he did he did discuss those with the ADA committee, and so I did forward those to the board, something that you may want to consider. So I think it's good to finalize that so we can get that piece in the warrant. And then the other piece is just to simply take a look at the warrant articles and see if the board wants to start taking positions. You do need to take positions on the articles. It can be support, it can be not support, it can be at town meeting, especially for some of the zoning articles, which we haven't seen yet, come back out of the planning board process. But there are some of the ones that I think that are easy and routine that you may want to take positions and get those off the table, because we really only have tonight and the 25th, and you're going to be finalizing the warrant on the 25th. So I think in the next 2 meetings, we need to clean that up. So that was my thinking of the agenda item.
All right, so I would suggest, and if others feel differently, please feel free, why don't we go through the warrant, article by article? And starting with the last bullet, we can take positions on articles if we're ready to take positions on those. And then in the course of that, we'll obviously come across the first 3 bulleted items, and we can just address those in the order that they come along as well, just so we have a roadmap to follow.
Good.
The agenda
Perfect.
as
Good,
written.
yep.
All right, does everybody have the warrant? So a lot of these are articles that appear before us on an annual basis, that I would presume that the board would typically be in support of. So why don't I at least start maybe by going page by page? And on page 2, as it's written in the warrant, Articles 1 through Article 4, any reason that we would not be in support of those, or is there?
Nope,
Support. Yeah.
support.
Support.
All right, so why don't I'll move then, the board support Articles 1 through 4, or have printed in the warrant, support for Articles 1 through 4.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You've got that, Mark?
I do.
Next, page 3, as it's written, Articles 5, 6, 7, and 8.
So, Mr. Chairman, so Article 5, Salary Administration Plan, that's the purview of the Personnel Board. Personnel Board is meeting tomorrow morning to finalize their recommendations. Those will come to you at the next meeting. I think they can be clearly illustrated and explained, and I think then you'll be able to make a decision at your meeting on the 25th.
Yep. So,
Article 6 is transferring a sum of money. Sometimes at the end of the current fiscal year that we're sitting in, we need to transfer funds to balance things out if we know them. Now that town meeting is so early, this kind of is becoming an archaic article, and we're not doing it at town meeting. We're waiting until those last 2 weeks of June where we have the ability to move money around, and the selectmen and advisory need to vote to ratify those decisions. So Article 6, if you do anything at this point, it probably would be at town meeting, because we're not gonna know that until probably closer to the actual town meeting date, March 28th. Article 7.
Excuse me, Mark?
Yes, sir.
Should we remove 6 from the warrant? Is it sort of vestigial organ kind of thing?
You know what? I'd rather leave it there.
Okay.
Put it this way, we'll know in a couple of weeks. I mean, it's a crystal ball, Sam, and I'd
there's
rather
some-
leave it there than take it out.
If there's some chance we might need it, then it doesn't hurt to leave it in, certainly. So,
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Article 7 is going to be rescinding the unused portion of the debt for the public safety project. I know the first number is 3. I know there are 6 numbers after it. And we're just trying to finalize with the Public Safety Committee and Mr. Ballantyne what those 6 other numbers are. So we don't have a number yet, but the article itself is good, and you could approve that this evening if you wanted to.
Mark, can I just ask, will we
Sure.
have by town meeting all the costs associated with the public safety? Are there still going to be some things hanging out?
we have to know how much we're rescinding. That number needs to be certain.
Right. I'm just thinking
I don't
what's
think
left.
so, Lisa. The reason I say that is because there's a couple of things left to be done with the driveway. So DPW did a great job coming in and making the modifications to
Yep.
change the traffic pattern. And they made it extremely usable and it actually looks pretty good. But now we need a paving company to come in and fix the granite, do some of the finish work and everything in that. I'm not sure it's gonna happen in March. It probably is gonna be April,
Okay.
you know, and again, April, you know how April is, April and May, it may be weather dependent. So I think when we rescind the amount of borrowing, we're going to leave out those pieces.
Okay, that was my
There
question.
may be some residual piece
Yeah,
at the next town meeting, say in the fall, to do one final cleanup.
okay.
This
no,
is gonna be the big one.
Okay, thank
okay?
you.
And then Article 8 is the budget that, is that vote to support? Was that taken at the last meeting?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, all right, so already support for Article 8. So then I will move that our position in the warrant be printed for Article 5, or that, I would recommend that we hold on Article 5 until our next meeting, when we see the information
Right.
presented by
Yes.
Personnel Board. And that our positions for Article 6 be printed as, for Article
You
6,
can hold on 6 until the next meeting as
Two.
well.
Also, so,
rather than at town meeting?
Because as Mr. Stivers pointed out, at the next meeting, we'll know whether we're keeping it in the warrant or not.
Okay, so,
Okay.
all right, so let's hold on Article 6. And Article 7, our recommendation support.
Yes.
All those in favor of support?
aye.
Aye.
And I seconded that.
For the record, I'll move that our position be support for Article 7, seconded by Mr. Healy.
Yep.
Voted unanimously in support. Page 4 as printed, Articles 9, 10, and 11. 9 is Water Enterprise Fund budget, which I presume, was that voted the last meeting as well?
So at the last meeting, we looked at the general fund budget, so the enterprise fund budget was not voted. There's some discussion of that broadly, I believe, in the rates, but that is something that will come to you. We can bring that to you on the 25th.
So we'll hold on Article 9. Article 10, was that voted at the last meeting? Voted
Yes.
to support?
10 was, yes,
So that was supported already.
as well as Article
Yep.
11.
And Article 11 as well. Okay. Page 5, Article 12.
So do you want to
Other
move to
question?
hold Article 9?
We don't have to move to hold it, do we? Just, don't-
Yeah.
if we don't vote, we not.
Okay.
We're just not taking action on
Okay,
that one
fair
right now.
enough.
And plan to at our next meeting.
Fair enough.
Article 12, Article 13, 14, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are annual articles that,
Yes,
that we have?
12, 13, and 14 are annual articles.
So I will move that our position be printed as support for Articles 12 through 14.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Article 15 is boiler at the Finn School. Was that voted as part of the budget discussion?
That was not,
Or capital?
that's a separate article,
Okay,
a separate, we kept that article separate from the capital.
okay. Is board ready to take a position on that one now, or?
Do we have any idea of what that number may or may not be, Mark? Am I missing it?
I was looking that up, I've not come on it yet.
Okay.
But if you want to continue, I can probably find it by the time we finish.
Okay, I'm just curious if we have a number.
Let's come back to 15. Article 16 is the revolving fund amounts, no real surprises from what we traditionally do in this.
No, so if the board recalls, the Department of Revenue first suggested, then required, that this needed to be, the language for the revolving funds needed to be transferred into a bylaw, so that each year you're not, approving the language and everything, you're simply approving the amounts. And so that bylaw was created, and then it's like, okay, so you only have to do the amounts, you don't touch the bylaw. And then we went and added the golf course maintenance fund.
Yep.
So then we had to go back and touch the bylaw again, so.
Yep.
This is the first year of us actually just approving these amounts.
All right. So I'll move that our position be support for Article 16.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 You know, with Mr. Haggerty sitting there, because you were so instrumental with the 9/11 maintenance, the $100,000 is the cap, correct? That's the most that can be in the fund at any one time?
That's correct.
Okay, do we know? I'm just curious as to what the balance is. I know Mr. Ballantyne isn't here tonight. He's probably the better person to ask. I'm just wondering how we're doing in terms of the fees that we're getting for that in having a balance ready for maintenance issues.
So I will say that, so Mr. Hegarty was integral in putting together the cost recovery plan when we went to put the new turf on the field. And when, I don't know if I'm giving you the credit that I should, but in putting the place, saying, look, in 15 years, we can recover this, and, we're not gonna have, the taxpayers won't have to pay anything, we can pay for it through receipts from the field. And that's why we went back to the state, and we had a special act of the legislature to allow us to do a 15-year lease instead of a 5-year permit.
No, I remember.
I think the fund is doing fairly well. I know that, that according to the projections that I've seen, that the amount of money that is supposed to be coming back to us to repay the bond each year for 15 years is a little over $50,000. I don't believe they have enough to be able to give that full amount at this point. I think that, and of course, Mr. Davis is left too. But I believe it was more in the range of 40. And I'd have to go back and look at that email trail that just recently came through from Rec Commission.
Sure.
So we are keeping an accounting of the amount for the bond and the amount that's recovered to ensure that, the taxpayers are maybe subsidizing it up front, but it is being repaid back through the monies that are generated from the field.
Yeah, just observationally, and it appears that the field is being used, if not to full capacity, it's being used a lot, which obviously is good in terms of revenue, and the maintenance seems terrific. As Mr. Haggerty and I both had lacrosse players, and there were literal ups and downs trying to get on that field in the spring, and it looks like some of those issues may have been addressed, which is great for the kids.
Can I, one little wrinkle?
I think,
It's on.
Is this on?
I think
Okay.
it's on.
There's one little wrinkle to this, and I got to give a tip of the hat to Brian Ballantyne, that Brian was able to change something on the bond terms to get a much lower rate that actually made the payments a little front-heavy, but over the 15 years, it substantially reduced the cost to the town for that bond. So that's why things are a little bit out of whack here, but hats off to
Yeah,
Brian.
just to jump in, originally, so again, give you the credit again, Mr. Hegarty had put together a schedule showing over 15 years we could pay that back. When Mr. Ballantyne was doing the bonding for a lot of these projects, it was a much greater, lower interest rate and better pricing and better everything else. He did it for 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and that was exactly what happened. It's just that the repayment of that is going to happen over the 15, but it's a 5-year bond.
But take advantage of the extraordinarily low interest rates
Exactly,
nowadays. which are-
Exactly, but obviously,
Great
there was
opportunity.
never the intention of the thought that the fund could do it in 5 years.
Right.
But simply so that, we're saving a lot of interest and everything, that was why it was done for a shorter term, so, thank you.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Which brings us to Article 17, which is the Community Preservation Committee. Projected receipts. I'll move that our position be to support that article.
Second. just with a note that state match adjustment seems to go down every year.
Will probably
Noted.
continue.
Yeah.
Noted. All those in favor of that being our position?
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously.
Mr.
We vote
Chairman.
on 16, I'm sorry. Just, we did?
16,
Okay.
yes.
Perfect, I just wanted to make sure, thank you.
We did- I have it written that we did vote
Thank you.
on it.
Yeah, so Article 18 and 19, not to jump in, I'm just trying to bundle where appropriate. 18 and 19 are simply authorizing the payments for the bonds out of projects that have already been appropriated by town meeting and completed.
Yep.
Or in the library's case, in process, so.
Yep.
So those are they're just authorizing the payments for projects already approved.
So I'll move that our position be support for 18 and 19.
Second.
Move seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. 20, calendar field appropriation. So that would be a new project for this
Correct.
year.
Yes, CPA has two projects. One is the construction of Calander, and then, excuse me, Article 21, which is the St. Mark's Church bell tower.
So I know that this was touched upon by Mr. Davis during the recreation update to us probably 2 months ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So are we ready to take a position to support?
I'd like to
Or
hear a little
not,
more
or
about
would you
both of
like to-
these, actually.
All right.
So, and I think there'll be a lot of questions about
I
them,
definitely want to hear
too.
more about 21 as well,
Yeah,
so.
I agree.
All right, so why don't we hold on that and see if we can work on getting an update at our next meeting on the 25th on those two articles for us?
Good.
Sure.
Article 22.
Article 22 is, so we currently provide certain real estate exemptions for taxpayers who have personal exemptions on their property. It includes veterans, surviving spouses, seniors, and we do have the local option to increase those exemptions up to 100%. And the veterans agent has requested that this be done. Obviously, it cannot be done simply for one class, it has to be done for all classes. I think this amounts to, if everyone who is currently getting these exemptions was able to get the full 100%, I think it's an additional $20,000 a year overall total for everybody. It's something that the assessor's office carries in the overlay. So that is, that's the identified source, and I've spoken to the assessor about this already. So this is something, again, the veterans agent brought forward, an ability to give those people who do, who have needs in our community, to be able to give them the full amount of what they would be able to get.
I'll move that our position be support for this article.
Second.
Move second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Article 23, I had actually recommended this one, just with the number of times that we had to keep putting names on the agenda for appointment to committees when they had
Reappointment.
not, with conflicting summer vacations, had not been able to be appointed in time, so we had recommended a change to 30 days, and I had worked with Mr. Hegarty on that. As I understand, Mr. Hegarty is in support of the 30-day for people to be sworn in for appointment to committees. So I will move that our position be support for this article.
Second.
Move seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Articles 24 and 25 were added to the warrant as a result of discussions that we had with Pine Hill Road and perhaps other local roads as well. So, just to get things started, I'll move that our position be support for Articles 24 and 25.
Second.
Moved, so it's been seconded. I think we'll need to be prepared for each of these to maybe not overwhelm people with the presentation, but I think we'll just need to be prepared to give a good solid story for
Yep.
for these articles and why they make sense for the town.
And I think the important thing on these is that this actually doesn't require us to do this. This gives us the tool that we can.
Gives you the authority, correct.
In
Yeah.
selected areas. So, again, if we vote for this at town meeting, one possibility is nothing at all changes. But if we have a particular problem, that it gives us an opportunity to do something about it, and you don't have to do it forever either. You can designate a different limit, and then you can change that depending on circumstances. So I saw it as a tool in the toolkit to deal with some of these pressures.
Yep.
And if you don't have it, then if you suddenly really want to do it, then you got to go to the next town meeting. So
Yep.
it seemed to me it was useful to have it available.
I guess 2 quick notes by me on that. Number one is and maybe this is what you were saying, Brian, that we should be prepared to at least give what our current thinking is on, for instance, whether or not we would in fact exercise the authority and where it might be exercised. That's number one.
Yep.
And number two, for what process there might be. I mean, I don't think there's a required process in the statute, but we might think about what process we adopt as a board if we're thinking about applying the speed limit to a particular road to give folks an opportunity to weigh in.
Right, have a
Yeah.
public hearing, for example, as part of the process.
Whatever the process ends
Yeah.
up being, but
Create
something
one.
that we're comfortable with.
Yep.
Yep, understood. So with that, all those in favor of our position being support?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Article 26, the meals tax, so proposed 0.75% meals tax. I will make a motion that our position be support for the meals tax.
Second?
Move seconded. Any other discussion on that?
I don't think so. I mean, based on the survey that Ms. Cook provided us with and the input, the feedback we got from the businesses that would be affected, it seems like a pretty straightforward and equitable way to raise some money for the town and relieve a tax burden for the taxpayers.
Broaden the tax base a little
Yep.
bit, which is helpful.
Mr. Chairman, I just do want to note that we are, in anticipation of this being considered favorably by town meeting, we are carrying an additional $75,000 in our receipts. If this goes sideways, we will be having an additional $75,000 we're assuming in our receipts, which likely means we'll end up with less free cash, about $75,000 less free cash at the end of the year. So we do have, there is a little bit of risk reward in here.
So we're carrying a lower amount than what has been
When we,
stated at previous meetings that we've
but
held.
it's gonna be September before we get our first, we're gonna miss the first quarter. So we looked at 9 months of it.
Got it.
So that's why, so we didn't do a full year. We
Got it.
hedged our bets a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, we're not gonna get a full year by the time it's implemented.
All those in favor as support?
Aye.
As
Aye.
opposition? Passes unanimously. Article 27, Southborough Public Accessibility Committee, which again hits the third bullet under this item as well.
Were you at the meeting, Mark, with the accessibility?
I was not, no.
Maybe we could have,
I did email you the.
I saw that.
Okay. Okay. And then there was a following email from the chair of the committee who said that they, were favorable to the changes that Mr. Litt was suggesting.
okay, and that's all I want to that's all I wanted to make sure, that, because I saw the emails and I was trying to figure out which one came first.
Right.
So you.
I was there.
You were there.
They voted to endorse the changes as written. They actually took a formal vote on it.
Okay.
Just for people who are listening, I'm Tim Litt, Woodland Road. The one other thing I noticed subsequent to that is at the very top where, to see if the town will, Mark, the range of sections changed from 9.34 and 35 to 1 and 2. I think it's a word glitch. It should be 9.34 and 9.35.
I have error on mine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
mine
I've
just
got
says
error.
error.
It's a fill-in
Yeah.
kind of deal
Yeah,
there.
it's because I used a bookmark.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Book-
We'll
Bookmarks.
get that.
That's an administrative thing.
We'll get that. administrative item. So admittedly, I do not have the comments suggested by Mr. Litt with me tonight.
I did a red line of Mr. Litt's comments versus the original version we had, and there are a very small number of changes in here that we could actually go through if folks want to, or
I think they're
circulate the red
minor
line.
in nature.
There's one additional bullet point at the end about record keeping, and then a number of other small wording changes.
There were only two that were anything other than wording or ministerial corrections. One is where you try and define a town employee. You got it wrong, because you don't consider employees, union employees, or people under contract. So
And not the SAP, which was my language,
So-
was incorrect.
and then the
So-
only,
So just so I can, then it's for my own benefit, just so I can be clear on this, why don't we just go through the
Okay.
comments
okay.
as recommended by Mr. Litt in order?
Sure.
So we can clarify them. So under 9.3.4, the first full paragraph, it currently reads, Southborough supports a coordinated approach. His recommended change is Southborough requires a coordinated approach.
And Brian, I had one more thing there. We actually refer to the town capitalized, but this version doesn't have the town defined in it, so I put in after the Southborough at the beginning of the second paragraph there, parens, the quotes town, just to define the term.
So is this another set of,
No, this is one additional comment that I had as I looked at Mr. Litt's
just
stuff.
that one?
Just the one.
Okay.
One and only one. Not critical, but tidier to define the term.
So I'm behind on that. So how do we feel about that?
I support the change.
I'm just wondering why you want requires instead of supports.
because my belief is that it's important to be definite, and, supports is soft, I think what we would call in the editing business, weasel words. I think it's important to make a strong statement that, it is necessary for the town to have a coordinated approach. We haven't in the past, and that's been an issue, and that's part of what drove first me and then the current committee to put this proposal forward.
I think my view is they accomplish the same thing, from a legal standpoint. I worry about any language in a legal document, and this is a legal document, that mandates something. Because if we support a coordinated approach, that doesn't lend itself to a challenge. But if we require a mandated approach and somebody wants to challenge that we're not carrying that out, again, is it going to happen? Highly unlikely. But from a legal standpoint, unless you're actually wanting to mandate something that's going to have a practical effect, I just don't think it's necessary.
Right, well, the rationale, for the whole thing is to say that, this is something we as a town need to do.
And we're doing it.
And if we're not, if we're not requiring the committee to act, I mean, clearly we're requiring them to act, and if they don't, we're going to be disappointed, and basically, that's where we want to go.
You're talking from a practical effect, I'm talking from a legal effect. And I'm just, my view is I'm more comfortable with supports than requires.
Well, at some point, I guess, town council will get involved, and maybe he can play referee.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm where I am.
I appreciate the point, but I guess I think it's worth making a firm statement there. Requires to me is stronger language, and I think indicates we're more serious about it, which I think is important here. So it's not a deal breaker, but I think we have an opportunity to be more assertive about it. I would take that chance.
Personally, I support support.
I support.
Okay. So
I think it's going to be support.
I'm outvoted.
Also in that, in lieu of the word enhancing public safety, public accessibility and ensuring, suggested the word improving or increasing.
That's the same rationale.
I like increasing.
See what that is?
Increasing is actually what I started with in the original draft.
That's fine, because it's a weasel word. That's the.
It's
Fair- fair enough.
directionally correct, at least, so.
I'm good with increasing. Are you okay with
Yeah,
increasing?
I'm
I am.
fine,
I
I'm
am
fine.
too.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So I'll move that we change enhancing to increasing.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No more than five. So nine, rather than saying no more than five, the committee shall consist of 5 voting members, as opposed to no more than
Right.
5.
And
Yes.
there's a quorum number point in that same paragraph, removing the word number. Redundant.
Is there any,
no more than?
no more than? Are we all okay with eliminating no more than?
I am.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I'm just wondering what happens. Does it cease to be an effective committee if
Yeah.
there's a
No.
vacancy and you're down to 4?
Yeah.
No,
Mr.
Because there's-
Hegarty, please.
Jim Hegarty, Town Clerk. Thank you for letting me talk on this. I will object to town meeting to any version of any bylaw that doesn't set a fixed number of positions and define the quorum. You're playing with fire when you have a committee that can have up to a certain amount of numbers. What does your quorum become? If you only have 4 people on board, and we've seen that with some other committees put recently by other boards and committees, we're asking for trouble doing that. So in my opinion, a committee should be established with a fixed number, and the quorum should be defined as the majority of the people. Whether we want to down the road sometime change that bylaw to me, the majority of the people currently in whatever, that's an issue. But to set up a committee to have up to a certain amount of numbers, it just, we're playing with fire, and
Okay.
Yep.
that would be my recommendation.
Any other
No?
Nope.
comments
so,
on that?
so in fact, it started as a range, and Mr. Hagerty's comment is why, and the up to is residual from an edit, so.
All right, so
We're all
I'll
on
move
the
that we
same
get rid
page.
of no more than.
Second.
Seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, excellent. And then the last line, calculation of a, deleting, recommendation is to delete the word number. So it would read, shall not count toward the calculation of a quorum for the SPAC
Yeah.
for voting purposes.
That's fine.
Redundant.
I'll move that we get rid of number.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. The next comment is,
Yeah, in other bylaws, we just talk about, shall not be a town officer or employee. Someone here added this lengthy explanation of, what an officer or an employee is.
That was me, and I didn't do it correctly.
Unfortunately,
Mr. Litt's
missed.
language is, I think, clearer and to the point, so I support the changes.
I think it would be fine to go back to just shall not be an officer, town officer or employee, but if you wish to have a definition, you need to have one that isn't excessively limiting.
all right. So how do we want to,
I guess I would support Mr. Litt's definition, leaving some wordage in about describing what we mean by it, because if we don't, people will argue what it means. So I think Mr. Litt suggested town employee is any person holding a non-elected paid position in the town other than a volunteer who's deemed a municipal employee or a special municipal employee solely for the purposes of Mass General Law, Chapter 268A. I think that
Which is the conflict of interest thing for people who don't have it all
clarifies for
memorized.
special municipals, yeah.
Mr. Purple, are you comfortable with that?
If you could just repeat that, please, because I was looking for something else here.
Where a
Sorry
town,
about
the
that.
new language is where a
So-
town employee is any person holding a non-elected paid position in the town other than a volunteer who's deemed a municipal employee or a special municipal employee solely for the purposes of Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, conflict of interest.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a little verbose, but I suppose it gets us where you're looking to go.
So we would have that definition of a town employee as opposed to the paragraph that's currently
The
written.
end of the paragraph, right.
So we shouldn't have accepted your change in the first place last week.
That's right. Oops, never mind.
Yeah, there's this long parenthetical that says where a town employee means.
Take
Yeah.
out this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a parenthesis at the
No,
end
well,
of
not everything.
268A.
Each voting member shall be a registered voter in the town and shall not be a town officer
Or a town employee.
Yeah.
or a town employee.
And then put it in
A
there.
town employee is any person holding any.
So the the parenthetical is replaced by that language, which will go in the parenthetical now.
Correct.
So where a town employee is any person holding a, correct?
Uh-oh.
So in
Mark, I
one-
can
We've
send
got a
you,
scowling town clerk,
We
though.
do, uh-oh.
I wonder if it makes sense to have individual committee descriptions that are redundant to other parts of the town code that already talk about who can vote and who can't vote. I think we shoot ourselves in the foot when we have incredibly overly complex definition committees like the Municipal Technology Committee that does everything but define the shape of the table they sit at. And I just think you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And inevitably, when you get down this path, you're going to create problems down the road.
So what's your suggestion?
Don't put anything in there.
Leave that, take that whole paragraph out
Absolutely, pull it
altogether?
out. It's already defined otherwise.
Because the only way you can be on a committee is to be a town resident.
There you go. Touchdown.
Well,
but Mr. Hagerty, I thought the goal of this was to avoid potential conflicts of interest here, where if you've got a committee member who is a town employee, for example, resident of the town, but a town employee, they may have some vested interest in terms of what the committee does relative to their particular department or position.
And who's going to appoint the committee?
Board of Selectmen.
There you go. Then it's your choice. That's why we as voters, and I'm speaking as a voter, elected you to make that decision. You're making these things so overly, utterly complicated.
Right.
I don't think there's any need for it.
So,
I think generally I agree with that. In this instance, though, I think it is helpful to have that language in there. For some of the reasons Mr. Stivers talked about. That was part of our discussion
Yeah,
when we were talking about that
it-
paragraph at our, I don't think it was our last meeting, but a couple of meetings ago.
I think it clarifies the intent in a helpful way, for me at least, which is why I'd supported it previously.
So is there a motion pending?
there hasn't, not yet.
Okay. Then I will move to,
Is a motion coming?
I will move that to accept that paragraph with the change in the parenthetical for the definition of town employee.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Okay. All right. 9.3.5, bullet 2.
just capitalization.
Yeah, capitalizing the word town,
Town,
the
yeah.
second, before citizens. All those in favor? Or I'll move that we do that.
Second.
Move second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So, on the top of page 11, so one change that I would just consider, the end of the first sentence, which continues, and to notify the responsible official or entity of any inadequacies,
Yeah.
rather than saying any inadequacies, could we say its comments, rather than limiting its ability to comment only on inadequacies?
Where are you now?
So at the top of page 11 for the warrant, the very first bullet,
For end of first
It's
sentence.
3 up from the last bullet on the page.
to review existing and proposed facilities,
Okay,
programs, and
okay.
projects undertaken by the town, and to notify the responsible official or entity of. The comment that I had suggested was, rather than saying any inadequacies,
Any comments?
just to say its comments.
Well,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that.
That's fine with me.
yeah.
So
Well, I
I'll
mean,
move
we're after the things that need to be corrected, so if, I would suggest,
Which
if
could
you,
be a
if you want to,
comment.
if you want to clarify this, you might want to say, you know, of any, you know, inadequacies, or
So-
we'll come up with something for excellent performance, but I think it's,
Inadequacies can be a comment. So my motion is to change any inadequacies to read its comments.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and then the last one you had, was this an additional line that you wanted to add?
it's a line that was in the original that disappeared, and the committee actually felt fairly strongly that it ought to find its way back.
Yeah, and I think that's a useful function.
Basically, there's a concern that people might be reluctant to step forward if they know that their name is going to be associated, you know, with a complaint or an incident report. And so this says, you know, to the extent that it's possible, you should keep the names confidential, and that has actually been the current practice.
I guess I don't have a problem with that as long as it's consistent with public records law.
Yeah, well, to the extent permissible by law, comma.
I support that.
Okay,
So I'll move that we add that
that bullet.
Yep.
line.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And that would be it. Thank you
Brian?
very much.
Brian,
Yes.
can we back up one? There's a typo in the 934A. 9.34A, two sections up from the bottom. Board of Selectmen shall designate and public accessibility coordinator, should be a public accessibility coordinator. Tiny deal, but I think town council will call that ministerial or whatever.
Yes, because it used to be ACC, so.
Yeah.
A public, got it. I see it.
Designate.
Okay,
Good.
so with that, I will move that our position be to support
Second.
this article. Who's seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And you've done terrific work on this.
Thanks.
I can't imagine that it's not going to get a lot of support at town meeting, but you've done very good work to get us to this point with it, so thanks.
And
Well,
thanks to the
it's-
ADA
it's
committee as well.
It's the committee's
They-
article,
they've done-
it's just
Been very helpful.
I know, they're not here, so I'm
identifying the
thanking you.
opportunity. I will pass that along because
Fair
I do
enough.
attend their meetings.
Okay. Also with that, I'm going to recommend, as Ms. Galligan and our consultant are here,
Yep.
that we hold off on continued action on this. We can come back to it, but we move to our scheduled appointment for the water rate study and recommendation. Ms. Galligan.
Always fun to talk about water.
Especially tonight. Lots outside.
How you doing?
Good evening. Good evening, welcome.
So this is Matt Abrahams. He's from Abraham's Group, who helped us with our rate study.
Thank you very much for.
He's a guru.
helping us. Thank you very much for helping the town with this. We appreciate your efforts.
You're welcome.
Ms. Galligan.
So we're, especially now that we're an enterprise fund, we need to look at our rates. I was notified by the finance team that we were actually not covering our costs, not necessarily the budget, but the, but all the other costs, like the bonding and all that. So we had the rate study done, and looking at capital as it currently stands as our capital improvement plan, we need to make a fairly significant change. Our rates currently are actually to encourage water, saving water saving. So we actually changed our tiers a little bit and also changed the rates. So it looks like it's a huge percentage, but it is a huge percentage, but dollar-wise, it's not that bad. And if you look through all the stuff we gave you that Matt had done, you can see that we tried to keep the residents who have low usage and the seniors, keep the burden off of them so much as put it more into the higher end users. So this is the recommendation which the finance team, Public Works Planning Board, both agreed with, is to go with the rates in that memo, except there is a transposition. And it should be $6.86, not $6.68 in Tier 3.
One question I had was, I know the current rates were voted by this board in 2015,
Yes.
put into place in 2016.
So they were 15 and 16. It was a 2-year
Two-
decision at that point, yes.
Okay, all right. And do we have a sense for when we think the next adjustment may need to come? And with the percentages involved, I guess a two-part question. Would it make sense to, set a schedule for implementation as opposed to waiting
till we're
5
behind?
years
Yes.
and do the jumps that we're doing?
Yes, and actually, that was one thing we did look at, was trying to keep the retained earnings at a certain level with our current plan of capital plan. So that was where it came into being a 4% just on the tiers for the next couple of years. So that's sort of our goal. However, we're gonna have a new master plan, and that might change a little bit and might push some stuff out. And I do think, based on the rates and based on our money, I do need to kind of elongate our master plan, and rather than do all the projects that we had hoped to do, kind of pull them out a little bit so that the money can kind of catch up and the burden's not quite so great on the ratepayers. So we will look again next year, probably this time next year, to see if we need to change them for fiscal '22. And we'll try to look at them on a yearly basis to try to make sure that we can kind of keep up with it and have littler changes each year for people, which is what we should have been doing, and I had not been, so.
Any other questions? Mr. Healy?
I mean, there's a lot of data here. The things that, two things I guess that are most important to me, the change in the tier rate is less important than, am I correct that the average water bill is probably gonna go up about $50 a year? Am I reading that?
I believe that was what it said. Hold on.
That was a little less. For
No,
the low end, it's less than that, but for the high end, it's substantial.
We have the average as going up about $100
Okay.
per year.
2,600 cubic feet is what we found to be average per bill. In the memo, it's just based on what the MWRA normalizes
Okay.
throughout, so that's why that comes that way.
Okay.
So,
But the increase will be higher on the, in other words, the greater amount you use, you're gonna go up into a higher tier. The
Yes.
rates are higher for those tiers, and that skews the average. But for most folks in Southborough who are gonna be in the lower tiers,
yes.
the average increase is gonna be less than $100.
Yes.
Am I-
Do you have this printout?
I have a lot of printouts, and that's what I'm trying to figure out,
No.
what is the most important piece of paper for that?
Based on what you're focused on at the moment, this is the most important.
Page 4, Marty.
Yep,
Yes,
okay.
the user impact.
So that table that you're looking at right there is the current bills. That's why the new bill area is in red.
Yep.
But if you go a few pages further to page 4, you will see the same exact table, but with impact on, with new bills calculated at the bottom as well. So you can compare the current to the new.
Yep.
And then you have the differences as well. And we gave a sampling of users that we thought would be helpful.
So you see the high end.
No, I
folks.
see it. Okay, so those are the important.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I was winding my way through an awful lot of data. Okay,
Yes.
terrific. And the second question is just comparing, it looks like, what are there, about 54, 55 towns in the MWRA district? And even with this, we'd be the 8th lowest? Is that the calculation you did?
So I was using water-only towns, so, because if they're partial water, so they get some of their water from MWRA and do some of their own, they're gonna have a much different kind of budget. If you have sewer, you also have a different budget, so I was just because the way the water enterprise funds work, so I just did, there's only 10 towns that are just fully supplied water towns. They have no sewer, and they're fully supplied by the MWRA.
Okay,
And we're going from being the 9th out of 10 in cost to being actually the 6th out of 10. There was a
okay,
math error.
all right. So those are, and that is that reflected in these, where is it reflected in
Yes.
these two things so I can figure it?
So if you look at the sheet that's at the top, says annual water and sewer charges in communities receiving services.
Yep, I see that.
And there's blue that just say a W, some say partial W in parentheses, but some say just W.
Yep.
There's
Okay.
10 of those. And when it's alphabetical, but if you look almost down the bottom, like the 5th to the bottom, it looks like, is us. So instead of having 437, which is our current rate, we would be 529.67. And you can look and see how that compares to, so South Hadley is actually like $1 more. Weston's much lower.
Northborough's higher.
Yep.
Okay,
That's a partial.
Nahant is very high.
okay, so it's the ones in blue that are being compared to
Yes.
us, okay.
And that just have a W, not
Just
partial
the W, not the partial Ws.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. All right, that's it for me, thanks.
Other questions?
I'm all set. Mr. Healy asked my question. Thank you.
I have a question, comment. I actually voted for this as a member of the Public Works Planning Board as the best of several not all that desirable options in terms of catching up here. I think the lead story here is buried a little bit in all this stuff. There's a lot of data here. But the issue is that for the low-end, low-volume users, the increase is 17% this year about. And for the high-end users, based on this page 4 data, the increase exceeds 50% in terms of what it'll cost them this year versus last year. And in truth, I think what we should have been doing is adjusting this annually to make that bite a lot less severe at this point. And hopefully we'll do that going forward in terms of keeping a closer eye on it to adjust. I think one of the big drivers is MWRA water costs are going up at the rate of 4, 5, 6% a year, something like that, which is a big hunk of our cost base for the water system. And so I think we can expect that the cost of raw materials here is going to continue to go up at that kind of rate going forward. So it seems to me it's useful to sort of get on a cycle to say, let's keep up with that going forward. Once we catch up here, to restore the reserve fund, as Karen has described, we need to have some capacity for unexpected expenditures, et cetera. So we're doing catch up, and then we're trying to, again, catch up for increases that we haven't made in the past several years. So again, the good news is the dollar amount for most users is relatively small. The percentage is a big percentage, but the dollar amount is relatively small. But seems to me the right approach is to keep on top of it annually and figure out what makes sense going forward each year here. So we're sort of caught up, and people may grumble, particularly the high-end, high-volume users are going to see this difference. The average, the new bill here for high-end residential number 2 goes from $34,000 to $51,000 a year, which is something that most people are probably going to notice, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have some comments about it out there.
Mhm.
So at least we're caught up now, which is good news. So
If I may, Mr. Shea, on that, Karen, I just want to reiterate, you did say going forward, we're going to use a different process, and,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
And I know that, the amount of water that you use on any individual year will vary, and it depends on the type of weather that we
Yes.
experience as
Mhm.
well. Has
Yeah.
there been enough, do we think, conservatism built into projections so that, if, we do experience a really wet summer and the amount of water that we sell decreases, that we won't run into trouble? Or conversely, if it's really, really dry and it does increase, that we're not going to be in a bind?
Yes, I think we do, and that's part of why the reserves are important to kind of build up again, or keep built up, because we can use that on, when we pay a year behind. So if we have a really dry year and then this year is wet, we're not bringing in a lot of money, but we're paying for the water we used the year before.
last year.
So the water bill is really high that we're paying, but our income is very low.
Interesting point, Brian, because if you look at MWRA data, over the last 50 years, total amount of MWRA water produced for their system of 60-odd communities there has dropped by 50%, from something like 300 million gallons a day to like 150 million gallons a day overall, which is pretty astounding. And we've gone down some, not nearly that much, but it's interesting there are opportunities for water conservation that a lot of towns are doing that we're not doing so much. But things like the low-flow plumbing fixtures and other kinds of conservation methods have really had a huge impact over the last several decades. So I think we can expect that there will be at least general decline unless, lots more people start irrigating their yards or whatever, which is always a question. That's the Westons of the world generate a lot of water from that kind of irrigation.
But one of the things that I was talking, when Ms. Galligan and I and the rest of the finance team met with Mr. Abrams, and we talk about conservation rates, you understand the other shoe with the conservation rates. So you want to put rates in place that say that the more water you use, you're going to pay more
Right.
for it.
Which we have here, certainly.
So what you
which
want to do is you
right.
want to encourage people to use less water. But
Yep.
if they use less water, then you're getting less revenue,
Yep.
right? So it's kind of a yin, yin and yang.
Double-edged sword, yeah.
Just to the comment that you made earlier, Mr. Stivers, I do agree with you. In my, one of my other lives, and I dealt with the Abrams Group in my other life too, so when I made the comment that Mr. Abrams is a little bit of a guru, this company has been doing this for a lot of cities and towns around the state. They do a nice product, and they leave you with a nice product that you can continue to work with to help to identify on an annual basis those things. This was something that was looked at every year. I mean, you've got two ways to do this. You can project out a little bit, and you can do a large increase and then ride that increase for a little bit until you need to make some changes, or you can look at it on an annual basis. I always like to look at it on an annual basis. It was easier. I think, Ms. Galligan has decided that, I think that's how we should, pursue it as well. I appreciate the work that Mr. Abrams did. I appreciate the meeting that we had to discuss this, and obviously the Public Works Planning Board, the review of this as well. I think this, is something that, can be sustainable moving forward. I do also think that there was a little bit of an issue with the transition to the enterprise fund, because we didn't have the ability to use any of our retained earnings because they weren't certified yet. So which made things a little more, I'll say interesting, Ms. Galligan may say difficult, but but again, we didn't have the ability to use that cushion.
Yeah.
Moving forward, there is the ability on an annual basis, and Mr. Abrams will correct me if I'm wrong, but to be able to use some of the retained earnings to offset some of the rate increases if you want to, to do that, depending on, Ms. Galligan says you got a really dry year, a really wet year, we're not using a lot of water in that. It's going to take a rate increase of some significance in order to keep us afloat, so to speak. We can use some retained earnings in order to help to offset it, to mitigate that rate increase. So once we have the ability to do that, we have the retained earnings set. I think that gives us some different options in terms of the rate increases.
I think we're on a better track now, which is comforting, so but it's going to be an interesting adjustment here.
And my last comment was just going to be that I guess it's not all that difficult to make my head spin, but an awful lot of work went into this, and appreciate that. Very helpful.
Yeah. Thank
All
you.
the Abrahams group.
Whoever did it.
All, not all.
So what do you need from us, Karen?
A vote to change these rates for this year
Motion to approve the
FY
rate
21.
recommendation as presented
with the transposition fixed.
with the, so basically you're reducing from 5 tiers to 4 with the new breakpoints, and then also the overall rate increase of 17% for fiscal, well, it's effective as of,
We'll read in March, so after that reading in March, the water you use will be, so.
effective as of the March 2020 read date.
Yes,
Can I simplify it and
yes.
maybe, and
It
just.
depends if Katie's already got it written down. If she does, then we're gonna.
I move to accept the recommendation by Ms. Galligan in her February 5 memorandum and attachments for a change in the water rate and for the operative date.
As amended, she amended one of the
With the,
transpositions.
with the 686 instead of 668.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
That's my motion.
Second.
Motion was made, seconded. Any other discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for all your help in putting this report together.
All right,
Okay,
Back to the warrant.
To the warrant.
28.
back to
We're at 28.
the warrant.
I believe we are on Article 28.
28. There we go. Lost my play sheet. Article 28. Okay, so this is bullet item, or the second bullet item under 6A, the National Grid parcel. And it relates to the warrant article, as Mr. Purple had discussed earlier.
I think it makes perfect sense to kick it over to the fall.
I think it makes, can we, and in doing so, would you recommend removing it from the warrant at this time?
Yes.
Yes.
I think that that makes sense myself.
Yeah, unless we have more detail, yeah.
So,
Mark
so
says-
I
So
know
I-
we're not
sorry.
in a bidding war on this parcel.
Yeah.
Right. You know, we're not, you know, again, we're the ones that initiated discussions.
Mhm.
I'm not anywhere near ready to recommend that the town invest this amount of money into that parcel. Not to say that I wouldn't be at another time,
Mhm.
but as we stand right
Yeah.
now, I don't think that we ought to move forward with
And I have a bunch of
this article,
questions.
and I think that we've got plenty of opportunity to bring this back at a later date when it makes more sense.
Yeah, it just seems so inextricably tied to the initiative relating to downtown. And that's now on presumably on a fall town meeting. It just makes sense not to have this sort of lingering on the spring town meeting, but to be put on the same town meeting agenda.
And I also think it makes sense to give us additional time to answer questions, you know, on this article. I won't get into my questions that I have on it, but I think the additional time would be very helpful. So when we do package it, in a sense, for town meeting, it makes sense to the voters.
Yeah, I agree, premature at this point, particularly with that amount of money.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
All right, so I will move that we delete this article from the warrant.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So, Mr. Chairman, as a follow-up to that, does the board want me to submit a letter of interest on behalf of the board to at least begin the discussion as to, you know, what is this going to look like? What does the purchase price look like? How would this be structured? How would this work?
I absolutely think that we should.
Will that
So
include
that-
testing questions and, on the land?
I think it'll start to open,
Okay, that's fine.
I was led to believe that we were going to have some of those answers last month, and then I got put into someone's spam file. So I think that that is going to initiate that discussion. So if the board is considering, as you've discussed, moving this discussion
Yep.
down to the fall, I think that we really should at least start that process to get the answers that we're looking for to help us make the decision.
Yeah,
Agree. I agree.
Doesn't bind us to anything and gets us
Correct.
more information. I
Yeah,
mean,
I think it's perfect.
There's no
Okay.
downside to that.
Yep. no
So I don't know
downside.
that that needs a vote. I just wanted that direction from the board. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Support.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Article 29 is an article recommended by the town clerk. I guess clarification on Saturdays. John, I think the town clerk had given a brief update on this a month or two ago. So, and again, and just going by the summary, really extends a voter registration deadline, which occurs on a Saturday, to be on the following Monday.
It's fine.
So I think
Yep.
that benefits the town as a whole.
Yep.
And I would move that our position be to support.
I second that.
Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Support for that. Article 30. This is a planning article, correct?
This is an article that was brought forward by the zoning board of appeals.
ZBA.
But Article 30, 31, 32, and 33 were before planning board for the required hearings as they, planning needs to give their recommendations as their zoning change.
Yeah.
The only variable is 31, which is this downtown overlay district, which the board has been asked to remove by EDC.
Okay, so 30 through
32.
33.
30 through 33. Planning board ultimately is going to prepare a report giving their recommendation on those articles, with the exception of Article 31, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right.
So, and hopefully you will have that language before your meeting on the 25th.
All right, so
Yeah.
why don't we hold
Yeah,
on
they addressed
action on
those, they addressed those Monday evening, as a matter of fact, so I think that report is on the way.
All
Yes.
right, so
So-
I would recommend that we hold off until we receive the report
Agreed.
before taking a position on the articles.
Yep.
Yeah, and,
With the exception of 31, which we can deal with separately in a second.
and just a question, when the planning board goes through a hearing process like this and they prepare a report, do they deliver the report to us? Well, in other words, will they be here on the 25th? Because I can't imagine I'm not going to have questions about a number of these things.
They will, the information, so I will get the final wording, and then that will go to Aldo. Aldo will then do his final review, but he has been providing guidance to planning board along the way during this process. So he should have some familiarity, but yes, the board would, I think then, get a presentation probably after the warrant is closed.
Okay.
Okay, so it may be an at-town meeting. If you remember in the past, sometimes planning board has had their final meetings the day of town meeting to make their decisions on certain things.
Fair enough. Okay.
All right, so I will move that we delete Article 31 from the warrant. And that is, again, as written in our packet, that is the proposed article for the village mixed-use district.
Second.
All those in favor of deleting it?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes unanimously, so that one is out. We are freeing up time on people's Saturday afternoon, which is a great thing.
They'll appreciate it.
By taking
Particularly
out
that
two articles, which brings us to page 19. Nope, I'm sorry.
19? Yeah, I think it's 22. Article 33?
33 is another planning board, right?
E
Oh, that's
34,
site plan. Yep,
correct?
you're correct.
Article
Yep, sorry.
34, which is the citizen petition noise bylaw.
Yes.
How do we
page
want
27.
to address this? So it has been, it is not amendable at this point in time. It must appear in the warrant
It
as
cannot be
presented.
amended until it gets to town meeting floor.
So we've obviously had the opportunity to read through it as it's written in the warrant. We kind of got a heads up that this was coming when we spoke with residents during the Deerfoot Road meeting. I don't know if we want to take a position on this at this time, or if we want to allow the proponents the same 5-minute spiel that Mr. Semino, that I anticipate that the town moderator will grant the proponents to make a case for us and allow us to ask questions. So I'll see how the board wants to proceed on that.
I'd like to hear it. I actually am inclined to support this. This is similar to something I'd proposed previously, so got a bias on this, but I'd like to hear what Mr. Lapine has to say about it.
Yeah, I'd like
Other
your
opinions?
presentation and have a number of questions
Yeah,
about it.
Same here.
And again, my recommendation, and if other board members feel differently, I think that, the effort to educate not only this board, but the public in general, the onus is on the proponents for those articles to undertake whatever means necessary to get the word out on their article. So I would be, if there are going to be presentations, it would be my recommendation that, if the moderator is gonna give these people 5 minutes at town meeting, or whatever time frame, then that's the time frame that they would have with us as well. And we could obviously ask questions, but I don't want to be a 45-minute presentation, and I'm making that number up, not that I'm sure they wouldn't be 45 minutes, but I think a brief, concise presentation to us, allow us to ask questions and go from there. So can we see, does everybody agree with that? Not agree with that?
Agreed.
Agreed. I think
Agree.
that's fair.
So can we reach out to Mr. Lapine?
Do you want to do this on the 25th before you close the before you sign the final warrant, or do you want to put these articles as at town meeting and then have those things and have that discussion presentations in March?
So why don't we reach out to see if Mr. Lapine is available to come before us on the 25th?
Are we also talking about Mr. Weishen? Which is the next article. I'm just waiting to get the certification back from the clerk's office on that, but the proposed language is included in the draft that you have tonight.
I would say yes on both of those. So for the two citizen petition article, and again, the text of that.
Yep, Marty, you don't have, I'm sorry.
The text isn't.
I got it after,
for it.
yes.
I was gonna
Sorry.
say, ban generally.
It's very brief.
The,
I must have missed that.
but I would say,
don't see
so
it.
why don't we reach out to those two proponents, see if they're available
For the
on the
225.
2225.
Yep.
Make it clear to them that, and again, I'm just going by memory, but I thought the moderator
Yep.
was 5 minutes for presentations,
Yep.
plus then questions that would follow. So have them be prepared with 5-minute presentations to us.
Excuse me, Brian, I don't see the text for Article 35 in the warrant that I have here. Is that, did I?
No, Mr. Stivers, I misspoke. The text actually came to me
Oh, okay.
after this had already been printed,
Right,
so.
No problem.
Yep.
Just want to be sure I catch up with it at
Okay.
some point. Thanks.
All right, so for our next meeting on the 25th, I presume we will have an updated warrant. And just to completely mess things up, because we deleted 2, all the warrant article numbers are going to change.
But they're at the end,
But
so I think we can deal with
These are the
that.
2 at the end, so we can
Easy.
deal with that. And
So at the same meeting, would you also like, I don't know, if it's probably an explanation from CPA about the projects for Colander and for the bell tower?
yes.
Yep.
Okay. And they may ask to bring the proponents with them for the
I-
explanation.
Yeah, when you talk with them, I would encourage them to do that.
All right.
And did you have updated information for Article 15, I believe it was,
Yep,
that we passed
15.
on?
I could not find that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, why don't we hold off
Okay.
until the 25th
Okay.
on that? Let's see. EDC downtown overlay districts, we covered, grid parcel we covered, bylaw we covered, position warrant articles. Any other comments, discussions on item A
Nope.
for town meeting warrant?
So just to clarify, so the board held Article 5 and Article 6. Article 5, you'll have the, I could see actually about having, I've got to go back and look at my emails and see if Ms. Rosenblum was more comfortable coming in on the 25th, I believe she was, to just present those changes to you. They should be pretty straightforward based on the meetings. Article 6 we held. We'll see if we even need that article. We can make that determination at the next meeting. Otherwise, it would likely be at town meeting. Article 9, the enterprise fund budget. We can do that at the next meeting as well. And the others at the meeting, and then we're just, yeah, no, I think that pretty much would line you up pretty good. So, all right, you just pretty much defined your agenda for the next meeting. So I think you're actually in good shape. The one thing that I will caution is that we're not meeting again till the 25th. Advisory is meeting next week when we're not meeting on the Tuesday. We'll know later tonight, hopefully, where they are on the budget. So we're gonna have to have some time, whether it's the 25th or rather, there's something that's done off cycle to try and reconcile any of those changes if we want to go in with a unified budget. So I just throw that out there. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Next item, under other matters, the draft committee charge for capital planning committee. I will move that we delete the words "no more than" in the first line.
And make Mr. Haggerty very happy.
I second that motion.
All those in favor of deleting that? Aye. All right,
Double
so, Mr. Purple. So this is,
Chairman.
is this consistent with the previous capital planning committee charge? Is
So this was, so
new
this,
text?
this is somewhat new text. This is something that Mr. Ballantyne and I worked with, a draft that Mr. Malinowski had brought forward. He'd been having discussions with Ms. Cook, excuse me. And so this is pretty much based on, his, he was the architect, and I put this into the format. I think it gets us to where, as to where we need to be. I know the board has already voted to defer capital to the fall to give this committee time to be able to review and provide their recommendations as to how we should move forward on some of those deferred items. I think you're wed to the concept. Now it's just a matter of figuring out what it is, specifically that we're going to do. I think the hope would be that we can come up with a charge tonight that Ms. Hale can have advertised tomorrow, and that we can hopefully have candidates in place that we could do appointments at the meeting on the 25th.
May I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Braccio.
Mark, how come there's one advisory member and then 4 citizens at large? What's the reasoning behind that? I would imagine if you would want an advisory, why you wouldn't have a BOS, but on the other hand, I would imagine you would want this committee to do the work that they're charged to do without any interference, whether it be from the BO, not interference, but guidance or comment. I'm just curious, why, was that in the prior charge, was an advisory member?
I think this is where the discussion that we had about this ended up, but I know that after the wording ended up here, the discussion continued as to whether advisory needs to be a member of this, because they are an autonomous board. They should be giving you a recommendation on what is presented to them.
Yep.
And in this case, they're going to have some, there'll be a member who'll have input into what is being put before them. So that's for the board to decide as to whether you feel, I think there is value in having a member of the Board of Selectmen on here.
I agree. I'm thinking.
And maybe you want to flip it out.
I wouldn't be even against having an advisory member and a Board of Selectmen member. That way, at the end of the day, we all want to be on the same page anyway.
Sure.
And it'd be good for a board member to be able to, come back to the board. I just kind of look at the Golf Course Master Plan Committee, I mean, the board gave us a charge. Mr. Stivers was on that as well.
Right.
We were given a charge, and we basically, amongst ourselves, came up with the plan that the Board of Selectmen and everybody supported. So,
I think it's a good point. That's why it says draft.
I know.
So it's up to the board. The board's got to have the comfort level of how this was done, and I think that was one of the comments. There was an initial discussion of, well, let's just put an article on the warrant and put this back as a statutory committee. And I think one of the things that was agreed upon moving forward, let's do this as an ad hoc, let's get it right.
Yeah.
And let's get it the way that we think, what we think we want in principle and what we get in practice may be two very different things. Before you make a bylaw out of this, that we can only address once a year, let's get it working correctly, while we have the ability to do as a charge.
So this is ad hoc?
At this point, it would be,
Should it
yes.
not
it'd
say
be-
ad hoc? Just to be clear. Because questions have come up about other committees, whether they're ad hoc or not, and I go back to the charge to
I'm
clarify.
fine with that.
Lisa, you're suggesting 1 advisory, 1 Board of Selectmen, and 3 at large? Is that what you were proposing?
Yes. Because I don't want to change the number of 5.
Yeah.
Either that or, again, I think it's important that the citizens have a voice but at the same time, I think it's important that if advisory has a sitting member, that the Board of Selectmen does as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I don't disagree. If that's the case, though, I worry that 5 then,
I
with,
know.
you're really gonna dilute the non-advisory, non-selectmen input. I mean,
What
when,
about ex officio for selectmen and advisory?
I don't even think, I guess my inclination would be, my inclination would be, and Mr. Shea and I were both on the same committee. We were 7, right? The Main Street?
Yes.
We were 7, and that was not an unwieldy number at all.
Yeah,
So
So
2
that'd
plus
be
5.
plus
2
5.
plus 5.
That would be fine, yeah.
I think that would address my concerns.
Because the only concern I would have on that is that the reason we don't have a capital planning committee now is that we couldn't get one. And maybe we're in a different time where we would, getting the volunteers wouldn't be as problematic, but I'd hate to set the,
Yeah, we've got 1 volunteer
So
at least from
large.
the citizens. So.
Correct.
Almost to a quorum for 7 people, but yeah.
Or do we just take the advisory and the BOS out and have faith in them and trust in them with their charge? I would imagine there's gonna be board members that are gonna attend anyway. Do we just,
certainly anything would need to go to this board and to advisory.
correct,
For support, so they would certainly need to, do whatever work they need to do to be in a position to, advocate for their recommendations in front of those 2 committees.
yep,
I might, rather than increasing to 7, I think I might lean towards just making it 5, and,
all citizens? Or
or we could just say 5 members, and then we would have the option
how you,
to
everyone.
include an
make
advisory
appoint.
committee person if we wanted
Whatever we
to,
want, yeah.
or a Board of Selectmen member if we wanted to.
So made up of 5 members, all appointed by the Board of Selectmen, that
Plus-
may include,
Or Board of Selectmen, period. Capital Planning Committee shall be
And just
made
leave it
up
at that?
of 5 members, all appointed by the Board of Selectmen, period.
Mhm.
And then all 5
then-
The
members,
positions shall be filled by residents of the community who are willing to volunteer the time. That would apply to any and all.
And then finance director, town administrator, ex officio as
Yep.
before.
Yep.
Yep,
that's
Yeah.
fine with me.
Yep.
yep,
That works.
One comment, on the, in the middle of that first paragraph, it's right at the left margin, it mentions projects. And I would think that the capital planning, in addition to projects, it could include capital items as well, correct? Such as a fire truck, such as,
Sure.
So items
So-
and projects,
Or
Yeah.
capital expenditures,
or just items and projects? I don't think there's a third category.
I'm just saying expenditures in place of items and projects.
It's funny, sometimes we get hung up on letter of the law, but this is one case where I think we may want to. So I would, because it would seem if a capital planning committee is looking at items, they're capital. However, I think it may be, evaluation of capital items and projects.
Okay,
Okay?
okay,
Okay.
that's fine,
Yep.
works.
yep.
the only other comment I'll offer, and if I'm in the minority, I'm perfectly willing to go with it as is, but in the remaining bullet items, as an engineer, I detest the word should. No woulds, coulds, and shoulds in the engineering world.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah,
Should appears 5 times, and I don't know if it
Will?
just,
yeah.
again, if it's okay for this, I'll go away with the comment. But if we think that it ought to be tweaked so that,
I agree, Brian.
Shoulds become will? See if
This
I
will
can
be
find out
achieved by
five.
regular meetings and discussions, that makes sense. While this committee will have no oversight on the operating budget, that makes sense.
I think that's more than 5.
mean, I don't, yeah, will is an easy fix. I mean, you could say something like, will be expected to blah, 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 but I think that gets too wordy, so I'm fine with replacing the shoulds with wills.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine taking
Okay.
should out. I don't like, again, it's not here. I don't like words that mandate things.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm fine.
All right.
So with those changes, I will move to approve the charge for the town of Southborough ad hoc capital planning committee.
Second.
Move seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we can now start to solicit membership.
Volunteers.
Yes.
You said ad hoc committee, starting tomorrow?
Great.
Thank you. So anybody listening to the meeting tonight or on video afterwards is more than welcome to, and encouraged to go to the town website and fill out an application form.
Are we gonna do a cutoff date on that, Brian? I know, I mean, if they're planning to come in and be appointed and such on the 25th, I would imagine if we, on the wonderful chance, get a ton of applications, that would be wonderful. But I would imagine you're gonna
I
want
mean,
to
we
be
can,
able
we
to
can
talk
try
to
and do a
people.
cutoff, say maybe the 20th.
So, sorry, Vanessa, if you could just use a microphone.
Sorry.
Friday the 21st.
Right.
Right.
That's when we post your packet, so the deadline I would suggest we add to this, for your first round of interviews would be the 20th.
Okay.
Okay.
So
If you don't get enough,
so we can always
We're
extend
gonna
it.
get too many.
attention, we'll, continue it to the following meeting.
And we should beat the hustings, because there's
Yep.
been an awful lot of comment in the community about capital expenditures. So hopefully, folks who have been commenting might think about
Absolutely.
doing it in an official capacity.
Absolutely.
And maybe connect with the local blog to ask for a push there
Yes,
in terms of
we will share
announcement.
that with her tomorrow.
Good.
Well, the nice thing too is when Ms. Hale puts it out on the Twitter, on the town's Twitter,
So you get it automatically.
it's picked up by the blog, it's picked up by the newspaper, it's picked up by,
We
you know.
also make use of, Tim has left already, but the rec department has, several hundred people on
Yep.
their listserv. So, we ask all our other town departments to share it on their own social media feeds.
Great.
Good, okay.
Thank you, Vanessa.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Is there anything on TV to watch?